Thanks, Roger. You were slightly wrong with that Dan Carter story because you left out the fact that it was actually my uncle who was the selector of the team at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, to Roger Knight, President of the MCC, and Derek Brewer, Chief Executive and Secretary of the MCC, thank you for the opportunity to deliver this lecture in the name of Colin Cowdrey. To Mike O'Farrell and Richard Goatley, Chairman and Chief Executive of Middlesex County Cricket Club respectively, thank you for the opportunity to play for Middlesex and to be in London. To the members of the late Colin Cowdrey's family, it is a privilege to be with you. And to the members of the MCC, thank you for being here this evening. I was a kid in South Dunedin who lived for Saturday mornings, when I pull the curtains back and I hope it wasn't raining, that the wind was blowing from the north and the sun was shining. Any of you who have spent a summer in Dunedin will know that I was often disappointed. Scottish miss, the locals call it. But there's a time and place for everything, and you could argue that summer in the South Pacific is neither. So I grew up not taking summer for granted. A day of sunshine was precious, because a day of sunshine meant cricket. Turning up at the ground, my thoughts were not of nervousness or fame or fortune, nor of disdain for the opposition. It was all about the game. It really was the beauty and the innocence that sport can bring. There were no concerns that if I didn't perform, I may lose my contract. No worries about lost fame or relevance in a game that can make you a household name in countries all over the world. There was no anxiety of having to testify against a former teammate in the Southwark Crown Court. That wasn't meant to be funny, but okay, I'll take it. There was no concern about how to integrate a teammate who had just lost the captaincy, which I had since taken over. There was no media that seemed to delight in the criticism. No second thoughts about charging the spinner, only to check myself because I remember the mortgage and the mouths to feed at home and the ramifications if I happen to run past the ball. My father, Stu, he played 76 first-class games for Otago. He must have been a great team man and tourist as he sat on the bench for about the same number. The Otago team at the time, they held in folklore back home as a group of gnarly, uncompromising men. They played the game hard. They played the game very hard. According to law, they were remunerated with a per diem that covered a pie, a pint, and a punt, of which the old man enjoyed all three in abundance. When Dad talks today about his cricketing experiences, he doesn't refer to the runs or the wickets or his averages, aggregates, but for him it's rather the friendships and the camaraderie and the experiences of his time as a semi-professional cricketer. It is, of course, cricket that's brought me here, to the other side of the world, to stand before you, one of the proudest and most distinguished sporting clubs in the world. I'm lucky enough to be delivering the Spirit of Cricket lecture named after the great Colin Cowdrey. I may be a veteran these days, as my knees and my back keep reminding me, but I'm almost 10 years younger than Cowdrey was when he finally called an end to his involvement in Test cricket. I never saw him play, but he was one of the first great players I remember. My friend and lawyer, Garth Galloway, flash suit, flash tie, receding hairline, sitting down here. He remembers the England side touring New Zealand in 1970-71. Cowdrey, a man of the church, missed the first test in Christchurch through illness, and he travelled to Dunedin at the invitation of Garth's father, Ian, to preach at the St Paul's Cathedral. He had dinner at the Galloway home and brought with him the Telegraph cricket correspondent, Michael Melford. And Cowdrey and Melford spent an hour on the back lawn bowling to a 7-year-old Garth. Unfortunately, I can't see this happening these days. A 7-year-old boy would be far too good for most of the cricket writers that I know. Cowdrey's record is there for all to see, and to my mind, he personified everything that is wonderful about cricket. He was, from all accounts, a courageous and skillful player, but never combative or unpleasant. He was elegant, he was prodigious, he was calm, and most of all, he played the game fairly. Against the West Indies, as we've seen on the screen, in 1963, when Cowdrey's arm was broken on that fourth day of the Lord's Test, when he was fending that bouncer from Wes Hall. The fifth day, we were battling for a draw, and just with a couple of balls to go, we saw his courage, plaster cast and all, on his left arm. He went to the crease and he did help see England home. They truly were great pitches. Just as inspirationally, he was summoned to Australia in 1974 and 75 after England had been hammered in the first test at the Gabba. He hadn't played a test in nearly 4 years, and here he was with no warm-up game and coming straight out of an English winter. He was batting at 3 for England against Thompson and Lilly. It's no wonder the crowd gave him a standing ovation as he walked out to bat. Legend has it that he looked at Jeff Thompson and he said, "Mr. Thompson, I believe, how good to meet you," to which the Australian quick said, "That's not going to help you, fatso, piss off." Some things never change. Cowdrey made 22 in the first innings, facing 101 balls and batting for over 2 hours. In the second innings, he offered to open, and in scoring 41, he withstood Thompson, Lilly, Walker and Mallet for over 2 hours. He was nearly 42 years of age. If ever we needed the proof that the game can be played with grit and determination, with courage and with dignity, and above all, in the appropriate spirit, we look no further than Colin Cowdrey. So it's with considerable humility that I stand before you today and deliver this lecture in his name. Even though for much of my career, I am bound to say, sadly, that I was very unlike Colin Cowdrey. In the early days of my international career, I was proud to be called brash, aggressive, and perhaps even arrogant. When I first made the New Zealand ODI team, there were at least a couple of guys who were my heroes, who had a swagger and a sense of entitlement and arrogance about them. Did I want to be like them? You bet I did. I became incredibly competitive. Winning was everything, and I really didn't care what it took to win. I now look back on that part of my game with huge regret. There are many things that I would change if I could. I guess growing up in a cricketing sense it's no different to growing up in life, except that it's much more public rite of passage where everything you do is scrutinised. There's no escaping some of the things that I've done. It's on video. Posterity in the worst possible way. You probably want an example, and fair enough too. Much as it pains me to talk about it publicly, I'll tell you how I ran out Matai Muralitharan. We were playing Sri Lanka at Lancaster Park in Christchurch in late 2006. Kumar Sangakkara scored a magnificent 102nd innings. When Kumar reached his 100, Sri Lanka were 9 down. The ball was still in the air, being returned to me as the wicketkeeper. When Murali left his ground to congratulate Kumar on his 100, it landed in my gloves. I removed the bails and appealed. Murali was given out and we went on to win the match. Not surprisingly, the incident created controversy and bad feelings. The Sri Lankans were stunned. Their captain, Mahela Jayawardena, another good man, said at the time, "Legally, it was run out. The ball was alive, but we play in an age where we talk about the spirit of the game. Hopefully it won't happen again. It's not the way to play cricket." If I could turn back time, I would. We were within the laws of the game, but not the spirit, and there is a very, very important difference, which is glaringly obvious to me years later, and it's that aspect that I want to focus on a little more this evening. Because nearly 10 years after running out Murali, I view things very differently, and I would hope that I'm a much better person now. Kumar Sangakkara is here tonight. Sanga, I admire you enormously. I regard you as a very good friend, and I just want to take this opportunity now to apologise to you and Murali for my actions that day. I want to share with you the things that I think were the primary catalysts for my change of approach. And I think it's fair to say that they came late in my career. At the time, they were particularly challenging for me and forced me to confront my character and question why I was playing the game. Eventually, they allowed me to see what was important about playing cricket, and as a consequence, my love of the game returned. Very slowly at first, but then in a flood. The first event was my first test as captain of New Zealand. I'd taken over the captaincy from the team, from Ross Taylor, and to put it mildly, it was a very controversial decision. It was played out constantly in the national media back home. To give you an example of the depth of feeling in New Zealand, the late Martin Crowe, a truly magnificent player, announced to the media that he had burned his New Zealand blazer in disgust. Strong stuff. In early January 2013, we played South Africa at Cape Town. It was a beautiful day, but the pitch at Newlands looked a touch green. I'd read about the tablecloth on the Table Mountain, and if there was no tablecloth, then you're bad all day. But if there was cloud on the mountain, then the rule was that you put South Africa in. I stared at the mountain looming over the city, and I saw a bright blue sky, not even one wisp of cloud. So when I went out to the toss, which I didn't often win, with Graham Smith, I decided that if we did happen to get lucky enough to win the toss, we'd bat. I wanted to make a strong statement, particularly to my team, but also to the opposition. We weren't going to be afraid. 19 overs and 2 balls later, we were all out for 45. I'm not sure what happened to the tablecloth, but it felt as if Stain, Morkel and Philander, the only 3 guys that needed to bowl, had whipped it from under us. The 10th lowest total in 2,069 tests. The 10th lowest total in 2,069 tests. What a way to start. If an innings of 45 all out doesn't force you to reconsider what you're doing, I guess nothing will. After returning to my room that evening, there was a knock on my door. It was the coach, Mike Hesson. Soon after, we were joined by Mike Sandel, the manager, and then Bob Carter, the assistant coach. This uninitiated meeting was to play a significant part and was what was to unfold over the next few years. We grabbed a few beers from the fridge and we just talked. We didn't whiteboard it, so to speak. We just spoke from our hearts about who we were as a team and how we were perceived by the public. It was agreed that we were seen as arrogant, we were emotional, we were distant from our public, and we were up ourselves. And we were also uninterested in what our followers thought of us. The environment that the younger players were being welcomed into was really poor. There was a traditional hierarchy where senior players ruled the roost. Ultimately, we concluded that individually and collectively, we lacked character. The key for all of us was the team had no soul. We were full of bluster, but we were soft as putty. It was the first time I'd really stopped to consider, in 13 years of international cricket, how we sat. The significance of what occurred that evening was that we recognised that we had to change. We wanted to personify the traits that we identified in New Zealanders, to be humble, to be hard-working. We wanted to be respected by our long-suffering fans in New Zealand. We wanted to be respected by our opposition, but before we could demand this, we had to learn to respect them. A lot has been written about how the New Zealand team played in subsequent years. I think that no one has captured it better than the former Middlesex captain, Ed Smith. He wrote in an article for Cricinfo, "The manifestations of that contribution are well known: freedom, openness, sportsmanship, the embrace of risk and adventure, and rowing back from the toughness is sledging delusion. The things that work for us may not work for everyone. In changing the way that we approached the game and respected the opposition, we wanted to be true to our national identity. In terms of that, New Zealanders identify with strong, silent types. Perhaps our greatest hero is Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person to climb Everest. He had a chiselled jaw. He never spoke boastfully about his remarkable achievements, and he devoted a considerable part of his life seeking to improve the quality of life of the Nepalese people that he loved so much. In the article I referred to, Ed Smith went on to say, "Athletes and sports teams waste huge space and energy on external motivators, mission statements about trying to be the best team in the world by 2057, blueprints for global dominance, strategic flowcharts about key performance indicators. In fact, if every sportsman simply tried to be the best that he could be and attempted to behave decently along the way, You've pretty much summed up every available optimal strategy in one simple sentence. After all, you can't be better than your best, and nothing matters more than how you feel about the way that you've lived your life. I couldn't agree more with Ed's comments. He recognised in his article the fact that sports people spend an awful lot of time deep in analysis. Every breath that they take is analysed. Nothing is left to chance. For us as New Zealand cricketers, we wanted to remove all the analysis. We wanted to be blue collar. And we didn't want to be aloof or perceived to be superior. We reduced the various theories that dominated so much of what we did. We planned less. We had fewer team meetings. And we tried to be the very best that we possibly could. We wanted to be a team that New Zealand could be proud of. And if in doubt, we also wanted to play the game aggressively, not fear failure. I've been given far, far too much credit for what we achieved. The approach was taken by every member of our squad. Everyone bought into it, and we lived and we breathed it. And the joy of respecting the opposition was also a revelation. There are times in a game where you simply have to enjoy the skill of the opposition and acknowledge it appropriately. Recently, I played a game for the Gujarat Lions in the IPL. We took on the Royal Challengers Bangalore, who batted first. I won the toss that day too. After 3 overs, RCB were 10 for 1, with Chris Gale back in the pavilion. Solid start. From there, followed a slaughter of our attack. AB de Villiers and Virat Kohli. They broke the world record for the highest T20 partnership, scoring a mammoth 229 runs between them. We tried everything to remove them. We bowled full, we bowled short, we bowled wide, bowled into the pads, so on and so on. The quicks tried taking the pace off the ball. It just seemed that nothing that we could do would work. AB and Virat's batting that day was breathtakingly skillful. Fielding at cover or mid-off for most of the innings as I was, the fan of me, the cricket lover, I had the best seat in the house. Rather than admonish our bowlers for what occurred, this was a time to celebrate genuine mastery. In a similar vein, I was interested to see the reaction to Alistair Cook's very considerable achievement of becoming the youngest player to score 10,000 runs in Test cricket. In an age where superlatives are thrown about willy-nilly, Alistair's achievement is truly remarkable, but much of the coverage that followed focused on whether he could beat Tendulkar's record tally of Test runs, with calculations being undertaken of how many tests he may play, how many runs per season he could score, and a prediction being provided accordingly. It is, I suppose, only natural that people want to speculate in this way. But to me, it just seems a complete waste of time. In doing this, we risk failing to just enjoy the moment, to reflect on what has actually been achieved in the here and the now by a truly, truly fine player. I want to talk now of the other really significant happening that affected my approach to the game. The events leading to it took place at the Sydney Cricket Ground on 25th of November 2014. On that day, Phil Hughes suffered injuries that would prove fatal. Playing for New South Wales against South Australia, Phil was a good man, a bloody good man. He was likeable both on and off the field. The outpouring of grief that followed the tragedy were testimony to just how much Phil was loved all through Australia. The New Zealand team was playing in Sharjah in a test series against Pakistan when the news came through that Phil had been hit and he was in intensive care. We were about to begin the third and final test against a rampant Pakistan side. They had recently demolished Australia 2-0 at the same venues that we were playing. We'd been well beaten in the first test in Abu Dhabi. To put that thumping in context, it was the largest winning margin by runs by Pakistan against any New Zealand team, and we took just 5 wickets in the match. It was a long 5 days. We drew the second test, but we performed a bit better. Going into the third test, we were very conscious that we hadn't lost a test series since 2012, and we desperately wanted to preserve that record by getting a win at Sharjah to level the series. But even as the eternal optimist, I had my doubts that a test win in the UAE was even possible. Misbah won the toss again, and at the end of day one, Pakistan were 280 for 3. Just before the start of play on day 2, the bombshell arrived. Phil had died. On hearing the news, my initial attitude was that we shouldn't be playing. I looked around the dressing room, and I felt that no one wanted to be playing. It had lost all meaning. There was also the realisation that it could have been any one of us. None of us ever anticipated that someone could die from a cricket ball, not in this day and age anyway. I always wanted our fast bowlers roaring in, having that winning attitude, trying to intimidate, ready to exploit any sort of lack of certainty or technique in a batsman, but never at the expense of someone's life. Cricket's meant to be a game. It's not meant to be a life or death struggle. It hit us all hard that for Phil, it had become exactly that. Mike Sandel, Mike Hesson, and I spoke to the match referee, Andy Pycroft from Zimbabwe. We told him that we simply didn't want to play. The umpires were Paul Rifle and Rod Tucker, who were both Australians. They were broken and they could barely leave the dressing room. It was decided that we should take the day off and see how things were the following day. That night, I rang Gilbert Anoka and I told him that I didn't know what to do. Gilbert's a sports psychologist in New Zealand. He's held in very high regard. He's worked with the All Blacks and the New Zealand cricket teams for years. I explained to Gilbert that we had a group of men who were shattered and we just wanted to get on a plane home as soon as possible. I didn't feel right to continue playing, but look, we knew there was a good chance we'd have to. We were the only international game underway at the time, and I felt that we had to plan for the fact we may be told that we were going to have to carry on. Gilbert was incredible. He said we should not judge anything that anyone did during the week, and that people would grieve in their own way and make sure that they were concentrating their energies and emotions on themselves rather than the team. He told me to try and bring everyone together, to try to lighten the mood if at all possible. Most meaningfully, Gilbert said to me, all your preparation, all you have ever thought about in cricket, just throw it out the window for this one game. In saying this, it was like Gilbert took the weight off my shoulders and he gave me a way to deal with what was happening, to realise that there were no rights or wrongs and the rule book could be thrown away. That night, most of the team shared a few beers in my room. The mood lightened at times, but there was such a profound sense of disbelief, shock and sadness. We knew we had to be at the ground the next day, but deep down, I think we all hoped that the game would be abandoned and we would be heading home to see our loved ones. Soon after arriving at the ground, we were told that the game was going ahead, like it or lump it. The decision had been made for us. Looking back, I think it was the right decision, but at the time, it seemed so wrong. In our dressing room, there were a number of players weeping uncontrollably. It was to remain a common theme as we walked out onto the field, tears rolling down the faces of many of the lads, and this continued sporadically throughout the day. As a captain, I felt unable to protect the team, and as we stood in the middle before play, I apologised to them for having to play the game. I fell back on Gilbert's words, all your preparation, all you have ever thought about in cricket, just throw it out the window for this one game. I reminded the team that there'd be no harsh judgment on any player's performance and no consequences for any failures. I believe that what motivated us was Phil Hughes. We knew we had to play and we would do the best that we could, pretty much just to honour Phil. The outcome of the uncaring, no consequence play was a revelation. I suspect it was something that personally I've been trying to achieve for years, but I was unable to do so, except for the odd fleeting moment. Here there was a release of many of the external factors that can creep in and influence a player. There was an instinctiveness that took over, no fear of failure, just playing and being in the moment with you guys. From 281 for 3 at the end of day 1 and 311 for 5 at drinks in the first session of what was effectively day 2, Pakistan lost their last 6 wickets for 40 runs, and that opened the door for us, just a little. We put together 690 runs in our first innings, the biggest total ever by a New Zealand side, and the second highest score against Pakistan by any team. As a team, we averaged nearly 5 runs and over on a flat Sharjah wicket, and we hit 22 sixes, a world record number in a test innings. In my newfound mental freedom, I managed a scratchy double century and Kane Williamson scored a much finer 192. Pakistan were all out for 249. We won by an innings and 80 runs, and we squared the test series. This test was New Zealand's first win against Pakistan in Asia in 18 years, and the first innings win by New Zealand against any team in Asia in 30 years. The way that Phil's death affected what happened didn't go unnoticed by those who witnessed it. Cricinfo saw it this way. The Kiwis were badly affected by the incident and didn't even celebrate any of their achievements. A remarkable thing to note here is that they barely applauded a wicket. Consider this. Just the 2 bouncers bowled today and no close-in fielders in front of the wicket. Take some doing, and still they won the game in 4 days to level the series 1 apiece. Full marks and hats off to the Kiwis for the spirit they have shown throughout the series. Certainly example set for all the other sides to follow and act upon. Long live their attitude. The realisation of how we achieved the result through the manner of our play comes sometime later on. The team had drawn strength from one another, and Gilbert and Oka's no consequences brought a joy of life to, in a cricketing sense, it was richly ironic, but nevertheless liberating. The big thing I took away from this test is the ways Phil's death affected our mindset and the way we played in the rest of the match. It was so strange, and yet it felt so right. But after Phil's death, we really didn't care anymore about the result, because nothing we could or couldn't do on the field really mattered in comparison to what had happened to Phil. Our perspective changed completely for the rest of my time playing Test cricket for New Zealand, and we were a much better side as a result. Many observers have said that we were playing the way it should be played, as gentlemen who respected the history of the game. People undoubtedly warmed to the fact that we no longer sledged the opposition. We worked out what would work for us, based on the traits of being Kiwis. To try to be humble and hardworking and try to enjoy what we were doing. It is vital that you understand that we were never trying to be the nice guys. We were just trying to be authentic in the way that we acted, the way that we played the game, and also the way that we carried ourselves. For us, sledging in an abusive manner, it just didn't fit with who we believed we had to be. It just wasn't authentic to being a New Zealander. This is not the time to go through a microscopic examination of what is sledging and to seek to define it. Everyone has a view of how the game should be played, and everyone is entitled to their view. Jeff Thompson probably shouldn't have called Colin Cowdrey fatso and told him to piss off. But it's a great story, and from all accounts, Colin had broad shoulders. The truth is that cricket is unique. You spend a lot of time out there in the middle. Humorous comments made in the heat of battle are genuine gold. And when Colin Cowdrey's funeral took place at Westminster Abbey with 2,500 people in attendance, it was Tomo who carried the Australian flag. Enough said. In terms of our New Zealand side, we weren't righteous in our stance and demanding that other teams follow our lead. But for us, it was so good to just free the shackles, to genuinely love the game again and to acknowledge and enjoy the opposition. And for me, when I pulled back the curtains in the morning, wherever we were, I smiled when the sky was blue and felt the anticipation I did when I was growing up in Dunedin. And so, reflecting on my 14 years of international cricket, I again acknowledge my numerous failings and mistakes throughout my career, but also celebrate that when I retired from international cricket, the New Zealand team, through the contribution of everyone, has rediscovered its soul. It's now a team that our country is proud of. Our followers know that New Zealand, we're not going to win every game, or we're not going to be the world's best team, but I think that they were able to look at the team as being a representative of our culture. The team now has a magnificent player and leader in Kane Williamson. He will rightly stamp his own leadership style on the environment, but I'm certain that he will always play the game with the strong influence of being a New Zealander, humble, hardworking, just like Sir Edmund Hillary. I've talked about the final 3 years of my career in particular, and the fact that during that time I rediscovered my love of cricket. It wasn't, however, all beer and skittles. Throughout much of that period, the spectre of the allegations of match fixing by Chris Cairns hung over me. And then, of course, the trial at the Southwark Crown Court, London, where Cairns faced charges of perjury. I have no doubt that you'll be very familiar with the evidence that I gave in the trial in London last year. Namely that Cairns, my former hero, approached me to fix matches in 2008, once in Kolkata when I was playing in the IPL for the first time, and again during the New Zealand tour of England where we were in Worcester. I think it appropriate, standing here, at the home of cricket, to confirm that I stand by everything that I said in my statements and the evidence that I gave at the Southern Crown Court. I did not initially report Cairns' approaches to me. As I said in the witness box when under cross-examination, it's not easy ratting on someone that I regarded as a mate. And frankly, I was scared. And I was also completely out of my depth. I unreservedly accept that I should have reported the approaches at the time that Cairns made them, but it was a dreadful situation to be in. In any case, before the New Zealand team's first game in the World Cup of 2011, John Rhodes, a representative of the ICC's anti-corruption unit, addressed us. He told us that if we had been or were approached about match fixing, we did not report it then, we were in the eyes of the ICC just as guilty as the person who approached us. I had told other people about Cairns' approaches. One of them was my captain and good friend, Daniel Vittori. After John Rhodes completed his address, I approached Dan and we went and saw Rhodes, telling him I had something to share with him. Rhodes took us to his hotel room where I detailed the approaches made by Cairns. Rhodes took notes. He did not record our conversation. He said he would get what I said down on paper and it would probably end up at the bottom of the file with nothing eventuating. Looking back on this, I'm very surprised by what I perceived to be a casual approach to gathering evidence. I was reporting 2 approaches by a former international star of the game. I was not asked to elaborate on anything I said, and I signed a statement that was essentially nothing more than a skeleton outline. Needless to say, by the time that I sat in the witness box in London in October 2015, I had made 3 statements in relation to the issues. The second statement was requested by the ICC's anti-corruption unit much later on, a clear indication that my first statement was inadequate. But how on earth was I to have known that at the time? My third statement was requested by the Metropolitan Police later still, and suffice to say, they were streets ahead in terms of their professionalism. They asked me so many questions, tested my memory and took a much more comprehensive account from me. Cairns' lawyer made much of the fact that I made 3 statements, and when I was cross-examined, he hammered me on the basis that my evidence was unreliable because I did not say anything at the outset when interviewed by John Rhodes. In fairness to Rhodes, I don't think either of us could ever have foreseen that my first statement would be used in a perjury trial in London some 4 years after it was made. But the point I wish to make is that it must have been feasible that I was going to have to give evidence somewhere, sometime. I think players, they deserve better from the ICC, and that in the future, the evidence gathering exercise has to be much more thorough, much more professional. In my opinion, a person taking a statement should ensure that the witness is advised about what may occur, that if the evidence were to be given in the future and witnesses do not put everything in that initial statement or change what they said in any way, then this would likely impact on their credibility. When I made my first statement to the ICC, my impression was that it would be put in the bottom drawer and would never see the light of day again. No attempt was made to elicit a full and comprehensive statement for me on that occasion. Worse still, in 2014, May, my testimony was leaked to Ed Hawkins at the Daily Mail. Everything I had said to the ICC was in the newspapers for everyone to see. I don't wish to dwell on the personal effect that the leak had on me or my family. Suffice to say it was, however, a dreadful situation as the media attention then focused on me. No witness who has provided evidence to the ICC should ever have to go through such a scenario again. The leak has never been explained to me. To my knowledge, no one has ever been held accountable. And in those circumstances, it is difficult to have confidence in the authorities. To report an approach and to give evidence requires considerable courage. Players deserve so much better. How can the game's governing body expect players to cooperate with it when confidential statements subsequently find their way into the media? It goes without saying that if players do not have confidence in the organisation, they will be reluctant to report approaches, and the game is the one that is worse off. If we're to get rid of the scourge of match fixing, a robust governing body is essential. In terms of the trial itself, I had no legal obligation to turn up in London and to give evidence against Cairns. Living in New Zealand, I could not have been compelled to give evidence, and frankly, I would much rather have stayed at home. But I believe I had a moral obligation to tell the truth, and I believe that the interests of the game of cricket and common decency demanded my attendance. The other aspect that I want to touch on very briefly before closing is the position that Lou Vincent finds himself in. I played with Lou for a number of seasons. As will have become apparent during the course of his testimony in the Cairns trial, Lou has his demons. He was always a vulnerable character. There's many similar characters who play the game now. While loathing the fixing activities that Lou took part in, I have nothing but admiration for the way in which he accepted responsibility for his actions and he acknowledged his guilt. I also think he demonstrated remarkable courage in giving evidence against Cairns. The insight that Lou was able to provide into the dark and sinister world of match fixing was, I think, invaluable. It would have been very easy for Lou to say nothing, to refuse to cooperate, but instead he laid his soul bare at a considerable personal cost to him. Lou's punishment from the ECB was to receive 11 life bans, one for each offence which carried that penalty. Lou was banned from having any involvement in cricket whatsoever. Perhaps the worst part is that Lou was unable to go to a cricket ground anywhere in the world. He can never watch his children play at any level. I struggle with the severity of this when a player has cooperated fully and accepted responsibility for his actions. While it was reported that Lou had agreed to the 11 life bans, I suspect that while sitting in New Zealand without a dollar to his name, he was really unable to do anything else. In the criminal law in New Zealand, a defendant is given some clemency for cooperation and entering a guilty plea. Make no mistake about my views. Lou should have been punished for what he did. Of that, there can be no doubt. But he should also have received some credit for his cooperation rather than having the book thrown at him. I raise this issue because if we are to expect players to feel able to come forward and confess all, then there has to be some recognition of this. Many of the players who become involved in match fixing in the way that Lou did will be weak or vulnerable. It is well known that the people who seek to engage players in this way will look for players of similar disposition. If players cooperate with the authorities and provide the game with rare and critical insight into the workings of this pernicious influence, then there surely must be something that can be done beyond giving them the maximum ban available. I have no doubt that the ECB's severe punishment of Lou has robbed the game of a golden opportunity to have him provide education to players, something I feel could have been made a difference in the future. Further, it ignored his extreme vulnerability in a callous way. In conclusion, none of what I've said changes my view that all players must report any approaches. It is a fundamental responsibility that we all share for the greater good of the game, but it is equally vital that players who do report and are treated professionally and that their report is kept confidential. Unless players can have confidence in the authorities and their processes, then I'm sorry to say, but it is the game that will be the loser. Similarly, it is vital that players found guilty of offences having acknowledged wrongdoing are shown a degree of clemency, failing which there seems to be very little incentive for them to come forward. I've talked far too long and it is time to close. Before doing so, I would like to acknowledge the considerable assistance that I've received from New Zealand cricket throughout the period that I've referred to in this address. In particular, I'd like to thank Chief Executive David White, the Chair of the Board, Stuart Hill, and the President, Stephen Bock, who's here this evening, for their unwavering support of our team, myself, my family, and I remain eternally grateful to them. If I may be permitted to have a final comment, then it is this. Cricket is a wonderful game. It is played in many, many parts of the world. It is unique and it should be treasured and preserved. Players and administrators alike are guardians and custodians. I feel incredibly fortunate to have played the game for so long and to have had the experiences I've had. While I've earned more than a pint and a punt per day through being a professional cricketer, I've retired from first-class cricket and international cricket with not the memories of the aggregates or the runs or the wickets or the catches or even the matches won. Rather, I cherish the memories of playing with and against so many wonderful people, as my father did before me. Thank you.